Hello and welcome to today's episode, which is all about talking about utensils. So if you don't know your slotted spoon from your spatula, this is the video for you. I'm out with an injury at the moment, so I can't do any cooking, so I can't really spend too much time on my feet. Still want to do something for you though, so I thought, what can I do that's just a bit of talking to camera that still provides a bit of information. So I thought I'd go through some kitchen utensils for anyone that's new to cooking or hasn't had to set up a kitchen before. I thought I'd take you through the basics of what you do need and then things that are nice to have. For anyone that doesn't know, I've got Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's a connective tissue disorder that affects basically every squishy part of my body. So internal organs, joints, skin, all of that kind of thing. When I walk, I have to walk with quite a powerful stride and go quite fast because otherwise my knees hurt. And my heel must have come down on a stone. My ankle went one way, the rest of my body went the other. Managed to stop myself going down, but yeah, I've really messed up my ankle. If you've got any questions about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, feel free to ask them down in the comments. I'm very open to answering things. The only reason I know I have it is because someone was talking about it on a TV show. So, you know, you've got to share these things because they say it's a rare disorder. It's not, it's just rarely diagnosed because doctors don't join the dots. As I talk through things, there's no real order to it. I'm just kind of doing it in sections of how it's laid out in my kitchen. Even that doesn't have much reason to it other than things that have got holes in the handle I hang up and things that don't go in a pot. No matter what level of cooking you're at, you're going to need something to stir food with. These days, you've got a massive selection of materials. So you can go for things like wood or silicone or metal. Wood is probably the most versatile because you can use it in a non-stick pan, whereas metal, you can't use that in non-stick because you're going to start scratching the coating. And that will release potentially toxic substances. So just be careful, be mindful of that. If you're setting up your kitchen completely from scratch, so you've moved out of your parents' house for the first time, you've gone to college, or if you've split with your partner, that kind of thing, go for one spoon. You know, if your budget's a massive concern, just a basic spoon is fine. So this type has a little lip there. So if you lay it flat on something, it lifts the back of the spoon off the counter. So if it's covered in sauce, it doesn't make a mess. Not essential. This is a set made from bamboo. It's a cracking material because it grows really fast, so it's quite sustainable. For a slotted spoon like that, I guess as well you can lift things out of liquid. So if you're cooking peas or something like that and you want to try one, I mean, I do it for pasta sometimes if I want to test it's ready. So yeah, not necessarily essential though. Again, if budget is a massive concern, just one single spoon would do. Spatulas are a nice thing to have because you can get a nice flat edge in there so you can scrape the bottom of the pan, whereas a spoon, because it's only got one point of contact in the bottom of the pan, it just takes a bit more work. Spatulas are also good for turning things over. So if you're frying like a slice of tofu, for example, in a frying pan, it's just nice and easy to flip it over with that. This is a nice one just because of the size of it. It's not necessary to have multiple different types. I just liked that one. And I guess if you're stirring quite a big pot of something, it's nice to have a bigger stirring edge. And then there's those kind of spatulas as well. So that's like, not sure what, nylon maybe, something like that. It's kind of a plastic that's flexible. And then that I think is technically a fish slice. This is a different type of spatula. So this one's more specific to kind of baking or lifting very small things if you need to be precise. This one has a cranked handle. Can you see it goes up at an angle? So it means you can get flat without your fingers getting in the way there. So I use this one, for example, on the chocolate stout cake to do the frosting on there. If you're baking, especially decorating cakes, this kind of thing is going to be much more necessary than it is for someone who's just cooking, for example. I've got various different serving spoons. I mean, it's not essential, I guess. If I'm serving dinner, for example, and I've got big pots of mashed potatoes and another of veg, that kind of thing, it's nice to be able to scoop things out. And then something like that one, you just get a massive pile of mash. I use this one for rice because I can just pick up a huge scoop of rice and pop it in a bowl. This one came out of a serving set that I had. So that dinner service, it had knives, forks, that kind of thing. And then a couple of serving bits and pieces as well. If you're a massive fan of mashed potatoes or of gnocchi, that kind of thing, anything that you need smooth potatoes for, it's worth grabbing a masher of some sort. They come in different styles. So this one's kind of one looped wire, whereas that's sort of a flat plate. I find this style most effective for mashed potatoes. It's just much faster than the other type. This one I'll use if I'm making wash the flour seitan, because you can mash the dough around with that. You can also use a potato ricer, which works in the same way as a garlic press. So you put the potato in the chamber, put the lid down, and it all comes through, extruded through the holes. When I'm making mash as like a side dish, like sausages and mash, for example, I don't bother peeling it or anything. I just crush it down with skins and everything because I like the flavour of them and the bit of texture. But if I'm doing something like the gnocchi that needs to be smooth and consistent, the potato rice is really useful for that because you can cook the potatoes with the skin on, so you get a little bit of extra flavour of the potato in there. But then use this and it leaves you with all the skin behind, so you don't get any little bits in there. Depending on how much you like potato, a masher is potentially essential. For me, it's essential. Potato rice is more of a nice to have. If it's coming down to budget again, and you've got to choose between two things, and a masher is one of them, and something else is, you could potentially just use the back of a wooden spoon and crush your potatoes against the bowl like that. When it comes to straining, draining, and sifting, you are going to need something with holes in it. So there's this style called a colander in the UK, maybe a strainer in the US, I'm not sure. But it's basically a container with bigger holes in it. So if you're doing things like draining boiled potatoes, that sort of thing. A sieve is going to be essential if you do baking because you need to sift flour to get some air in there. If it's a choice of the two, I'd opt for a sieve, like get a big sieve, because you can't do things in here that you can do in here. For example, rinsing things like rice and quinoa especially, it's all just going to go straight through the holes at the bottom. A sieve is also useful for things when I've done the fruit butters. So I've poured the puree through the sieve and then rubbed it through, because then you get any trace bits of skin, pips, stems, that kind of thing. So again, it's a time saver because you don't have to peel the apples, for example, before you cook them. I've got a tiny little sieve that's very useful if I do, like I buy big bags of shiitake mushrooms from the Chinese supermarket and then grind it in the coffee grinder so it's a fine powder, and then just sieve it through there. Same with spices, that kind of thing. When I did the dishwasher liqueurs, I made limoncello, and because you only need the skin of the lemon, it left me with all of the kind of fruit itself. So I juiced it, ran that through the sieve to get the pulp out of it, and then froze the juice in cubes. Again, definitely not essential, but nice to have, and you can pour cocktails through there, that kind of thing. You can also get this kind of strainer, so it's, fairly small. This is called a spider. This is really good if you're deep frying things, so you can just dip into the oil and pull things out that way. I also use this if I'm doing the gnocchi, because I can put the raw gnocchi in here and lower it into the water. Because it's gluten-free, the ones that I've made in the past, it falls apart more readily than like a wheat flour gnocchi does. For things like soups and stews, anything that's very wet, it's nice to have a ladle. It will be subjective whether you think this is essential or not. I'd say it is for soup, because otherwise it's going to be very messy trying to get a portion of soup out of a big pan into a bowl. I mean, I guess you could do it with a mug maybe. This ladle came out of that same set as the spoon did, so it's nice because it's fairly elegant looking. It's quite nice on a dinner table for a sauce, that sort of thing. I've also got a very small size one. This one's quite useful if I'm packing powders into jars, like I did with the custard powder for the jammy custards. Again, this is a subjective one, whether or not you need it. If you're doing any baking or following other people's recipes, you're probably going to need some sort of measurement device. So I've got like a stack of spoon measurements. That's a measuring jug that's in milliliters. And then I've got some cup measurements as well. I might do another video about measurements at some point and be a bit more in depth with it and just sort of give you a precise indication of why milliliters and grams are much more precise than cups. To give you a very rough idea, measuring a cup of flour can give you wildly different weights, because if you stick your cup measurement into a bag of flour and scoop it that way, you can end up with more flour than you would if you tipped it in a spoonful at a time into the measurement because of compression. But cups volume measurements are kind of easier to visualize. Also bear in mind that a cup in America is 240 mils, but in Australia it's 250 mils. So there's no sort of universal measurement, whereas a milliliter is a milliliter no matter where you are in the world. Most measuring spoons will come with at least a tablespoon, a teaspoon, and like a half teaspoon. Some of them have got a third, I think some of them have got an eighth even. For things like baking a cake or making sauces, it's nice to have a silicone spatula because it scrapes the bowl really cleanly, so you don't lose any of that gooey deliciousness. These can also stand quite a high temperature. I think silicone, most of them go up to like 200 degrees C before they start melting. So it's useful to have. You could use something like that to stir a pot, like even a stir fry. So if it comes up against a wooden spoon versus a spatula, maybe even just get the spatula because it's going to have more applications than a spoon would. The silicone brush is a nice thing to have for doing glazes, marinades, that kind of thing, because the bristles hold quite a lot of liquid in there. I used the silicone brush as well when I did the kind of chicken Kievs, where I dipped the brush in chicken flavour stock powder and brushed that over the tofu. Holds in a nice amount of powder as well. It's useful for things like that. And I find it holds more than a pastry brush does. If you want to grate anything, you're going to need a grater of some sort. So I've got an old school style box grater. This is possibly one of the most common types that you'll see. So there's like a coarse grate, there's a slice, then there's like a smallish, and then very fine. That's for things like nutmeg, Parmesan cheese, that kind of thing. I tend to only use this for the coarse side of it because the holes are nice and big. When I did the tacos and the not shepherd's pie, I grated the tofu on this before cooking it. So you just get nice pieces that way. I've also got this style. I think I got this from IKEA a while ago. So it's got two different graters on it. It did come with a lid, but then I put it in the dishwasher and it bent. So it no longer functions. This one I use for grated cheese because I can just grate the cheese straight into there. And then the kind of foot on it here is made of rubber or silicone or something so it doesn't slip. If you imagine I'm holding something onto it and pushing down, it doesn't move so much. My counter's a little bit wet, so that's why it is sliding. I've also got two microplane graters. Microplane is the brand name, but I think it's becoming synonymous with this kind of grater. You know, like Sellotape is a brand name. This one is good for very finely grating spices, so things like nutmeg, cheese, like a hard cheese. You'll have seen me use that in the shepherd's pie and the tacos because it's like a solid, dense block. Personally, I'd say a grater of some sort is essential, but I guess it's just going to come down to what you need it for. The way I'd look at it, if budget is a consideration, you're thinking, well, I don't want to pay for a grater, I'll just buy bags of grated cheese. Just look at the price of a bag of grated cheese compared to like a block of cheese, and you'll see that you're going to save money. I know it's more of a kind of short-term investment, but over the long run, you're going to save a lot of money. So it's worth having, especially in plant-based cooking, because you can do so much with a block of tofu just by grating and doing different things with the texture. You can create like a ground meat. When it comes to whisks, these will probably only be essential if you're baking or making a lot of sauces. When it comes to things like cake batter, for example, a whisk is faster than a spoon is. Whether or not you consider it essential is going to be down to you. I use a whisk most commonly to do like a stir fry sauce. What you're doing is taking a hot liquid and adding a thickener into it. And you need to move the liquid fast, otherwise you start getting big globs of the thickener. So for example, cornstarch slurry. This one's topped with silicone like beads at the end, which means I can use it in a non-stick pan. The days of me hand whisking anything like a meringue, for example, I don't do it anymore. I just use a cake mixer. Because joint problems. This is another nice one. It's kind of got a springy boing to it. So again, it's just really nice for sauces. It gets things really nicely mixed quickly. I think that little one came out of a gift set with some hot chocolate. So it came with like a mug, some hot chocolate powder, marshmallows, and a little whisk. And then I can't remember where I got this one from. But these two are nice for doing like a chia seed egg replacement because I can do it in a little dish and then give it a really good whisk, rather than doing it in a big bowl and trying to get something that size into it. So it's just definitely not essential though. If you're in the pound shop or dollar store and you see one of these hot chocolate things, grab yourself some whisks. I've got a couple of different types of tongs. These, again, it's going to depend on how much you use them, whether you think it's essential or not. So for this type of tong, I use this to turn slices of tofu over in the air fryer or sausages. I also use this if I've done a big pot of pasta. You know, you can go in and scoop out a massive quantity of pasta rather than having to mess around with multiple forks. So it's nice for things like that. These can also be helpful if you've got a toaster and your toast gets wedged in. You can go in without burning your fingers on the sides. I use these sometimes as well if I've put a silicone mat in the air fryer. So I'll use that to kind of pinch it because it can get really hot in the air fryer. With this style of tong, to store them, if you pull the thing up, it closes it. And then if you push it in, they spring open. So it just means it's not taking up such a big space. And then the smaller style, it's got like a little metal clasp there. So again, you just slide it to the end and they open. The garlic press is a really nice thing to have. Same principle as the potato ricer. You put the garlic in and then squeeze it and it comes out through the holes. The benefit of a garlic press is your fingers don't stink of garlic, because if you peel it and then chop it by hand, I just find the smell can linger much more than it does. Because with that, you don't really have to touch it, because you can knock, the skin will be left behind, so you can just knock that off with a knife. Pizza wheel, definitely not essential, but very nice to have. When I did the polenta crisps, pizza wheel was a nice way of doing that. And it's just fast, definitely not essential. But you know, if someone's saying, what do you want for Christmas or your birthday? Ask them to get you a little pizza set, like a pizza stone and a pizza wheel, there you go. A can opener of some sort is probably going to be essential for you. More companies are starting to put ring pulls on them, so you just pop that up and then peel it back. But a lot of them don't. If you don't have a can opener, you've then got a bit of a battle of getting your stuff out of it. I think I've had 3 or 4 can openers throughout my life, and they all open the can in a slightly different way. Some of them, like that one, it punches a hole next to the rim within, but then other ones will go around the lip there, and then some just cut a very jagged line all the way around the top. You can pick up a can opener really cheaply. I think I've seen them for under £1, you know, under $1 kind of thing. Just like a very simple metal one, but they are just a bit more jagged and less smooth. So if you've got any hand issues especially, it can just be really painful to open a can with them. A lot of openers as well will have a little thing there, so you can pop the top off a beer bottle. Winner. Citrus juices are a definite nice to have, not essential at all. This style is a reamer. So you cut the fruit in half and then stab that in, twist it round. And then this style, a bit like a garlic press, you put the cut side down in it and then you clamp it and it comes out the holes in the bottom. If money's really tight or space is limited, don't bother with those at all. What you can do is roll the fruit on the counter just to break the cells up inside. Do that for whatever method you're using. But then just jab a fork in and squeeze the fruit around the fork while it's on the tines. And that helps get the juice out. Or you can just stick your fingers in and squidge it. If you've got the space for it, bulk buying is a great way of saving a bit of money. So I buy like big 5-litre bottles of oil and then decant it into a bottle. For doing things like that, decanting one thing into another, you'll want a funnel of some sort. So you've got just a straight funnel there, but then when that's in, it's got tiny little holes in, so it's got a bit of filtration. And it also came with a very fine mesh insert, so you can put that on, gives you a really fine filtration. I put the filter on there for when I did the limoncello and the coffee tequila, and also when I sieved the broth that I'd poached the wash the flour steaks in. I sieved that and made a sauce out of the liquid, so it's useful to have. Not essential though. You could get a similar effect by putting, you know, getting a muslin cloth and doubling it, popping that in the sieve and pouring it through there. If space is at a premium, you can also get this little type, so it pops out and then folds flat. This one came with like a spray bottle for some oil, so if I preheat the air fryer, spray a bit of oil in there, and that just came in the box with it, which was a really nice bonus. If I refill like the pepper mill and the salt mill, this is nice just to get down the side so it doesn't go everywhere. So it's useful to have. Whether or not it's essential, again, is going to depend on how much you'd use that kind of thing. But if you're first setting up a kitchen, probably not, but just something to acquire down the line. The final utensil is peelers. This style is known as a speed peeler. So it works, for example, on a carrot, you push down and it takes a bit off, and then you pull up and it takes some off. Whereas some of them will only work in one direction. So it works that hole there, both sides of the hole have got like a cutting edge on them, so it works on a swivel. And then some peelers will also have like a little bit there. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that there. That's to get the eyes out of potatoes. I've never used it. For me, that causes more problems than it solves. If I need to get the eye out of a potato, I'll cut it with a knife. But if I'm doing ribbons of carrots and cucumbers for like a salad, that gets in the way. So you end up with quite a thick bit that you can't slice. I keep meaning to cut that off and just not getting around to it. Bought this one recently. This is a julienne peeler. So it works in the same way as that. It peels a slice. Those little teeth there, as it pulls the ribbon back, those teeth slice it into thin shreds. So it's going to be great for things like coleslaw or making a celeriac remoulade. The celeriac's the big round root vegetable. Mix that with some mayonnaise and mustard and other bits. You've got a great little salad. So yeah, you'll be seeing more of that as the weather starts warming up. The only time I peel a vegetable is if I'm doing the celeriac or sometimes a sweet potato, because the skin's quite thick and it can be just a bit unpleasant to eat. But if I'm roasting carrots or potatoes, I just leave the skin on because a lot of flavour is in the skin. There's more to life than peeling veg, quite frankly. If you like your mashed potatoes really smooth, then you're going to need a peeler or a ricer. I've got ideas simmering of future videos, so I'll do knives and other kind of cutting contraptions in a video for you, and then I'll do the weights and measurements kind of one as a separate video, just because then I can get a bit more in depth with those. If you've got any questions, need any advice, stick them down in the comments and I'll do what I can to answer those for you. My ankle's now screaming, so I'm gonna end things there and go and sit down, ice it and rest, because this is about my limit really. If you want more cooking know-how and kitchen basics, hit subscribe and make sure you turn on notifications. That way you'll be told every time there's a new video. And while you're waiting for next week's, check out this.